This is what we did in class on Tuesday, April 14th. Remember, you've checked off 9 standards. We're trying to check off another 6. This is reporting category 3 algebra, 706.3.1. Evaluate algebraic expressions involving rational values for coefficients and or variables. Interpret the slope of a line as a unit rate given the graph of a proportional relationship. Represent proportional relationships with equations, tables, and graphs. Solve linear equations with rational coefficients, symbolically or graphically. Translate verbal and symbolic representations. Basically, can you solve a word problem? Solve contextual problems involving 2-step linear equations. That's our big focus, so 706.3.8, which is what we're working on this week. This will check off 6 additional standards once we've done this one. So we have here graphing with slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. Now remember, I was telling you that m is the slope, b will tell us where the line is going to cross over the y-axis. All you need to worry about right now with this problem is figuring out what y is. So right here, yesterday, well, on the 14th, a lot of you guys were trying to figure out how to solve for y and x. You're not solving for y and x here. You're actually making up your own y and x, and then you're making your own graph. So if you remember what I called it in class, I said you get to make your choices here. You get to choose what you have here. So I always plug in 0. That way I can see where my line is going to cross over the y-axis. I always do that. Plus, it's easy. I can just say 0. I get to say 0 plus or whatever else is going on here. So I get a coordinate out of the way, and I get to figure out where it's crossing the y-axis. Okay, next thing I do is I plug in 1, where this x is, and say 1 plus 4, because look at my x column. All this is doing here is saying that these are my values for x, and I'm going to plug these into my equation. So I'll make it easy on myself. 1 plus 4 gives me 5. Next one is 2. Plug in 2 for x. Y equals 2 plus 4 gives me 6. Next thing you need to do, go ahead and number your graph. Remember, I was telling you that you need to make your graph look the same. When you're doing slope, your x-axis and your y-axis, however you number it, it needs to be the same on x and y. And I would number it so that it makes sense. Generally speaking, you'll be safe doing just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. It would be uncommon at your grade level to really have to do anything different from that. So 0, 4, first point, 0, 4. Next point, 1, 5. And my next point would be 2, 6. So here I have my points for my graph. Very simple. The only thing left for me to do now is to draw my lines. Very simple idea. Now, when you're looking at this, we'll go ahead and talk about it. This is a proportion. We have to figure out what kind of proportion. Is this a direct or an inverse proportion? The simple answer is that this is just a generic proportion. It's not direct because it doesn't start at the origin. Remember, our direct proportions always start at the origin. And it is not an inverse because x, in this situation, x is increasing as y is increasing. But it is a proportion because x and y are increasing at constant rates. This example is very similar to the swimming pool membership or the health club membership, where you pay a fee up front and then whatever you pay each day. Also, I would point out that we can identify our slope. Remember, we talked on April 15th, that's Wednesday, that m equals the slope, which is rise over run, also known as change in y, that's delta y, over delta x, which is just a fancy math term way of saying the change in y over change in x. So if I'm looking at my slope, if I'm trying to identify my slope here, all I have to do is note that when I go up, I'm going up 1, and I'm going to the side 1, so my slope here is 1, 1. M equals 1 over 1. So if I'm looking at y here on my table, if I just look over here at y, I notice that there's a difference between 4 and 5 of 1. There's a difference between 5 and 6 of 1. That's a way to check my answer. I look over here at x. Because I know my consecutive coordinates, I'm seeing between 0 and 1, there's a difference of 1. Between 1 and 2, there's a difference of 1. So I've checked 2 different ways to make sure that my slope is correct, which is m equals 1 over 1. Or to say it in a more simple fashion, m equals 1, which y equals mx plus b, y equals x plus 4, there's really a 1 right here. We just don't write it because we don't need to. This is the second page of your notes. This is just a simple proportion graph. This would be, let's figure out if this is a direct or indirect proportion. I'm looking here at y equals 1/2 x. Now again, I've made my table. Here's my nice table. I get to choose my x. So I always choose 0, I always choose 1. Those are going to be the easiest. They're going to make everything easy. And remember what I told you, you only need 2 coordinates to make a straight line. So we'll go ahead and plug these in. 1/2 times 0 gives me 0. 1/2 times 1 gives me 1/2. Pretty simple. Or you can say 0.5. Whatever you prefer. I like to use decimals just because decimals are easier to look at and think about in your head. So the next one, 2. 1/2 times 2. 2 halves make 1 whole. 3 times 1/2. 3 halves is 1 and 1/2. 1.5, 1 and 1/2. Either way, whatever you prefer. Now go over here and number your graph. Make that easy on yourself. Because you're a creature of habit, we all are, I always tell everybody, just do your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Make it easy because you're going to develop a habit. You're going to develop a routine. Make it something that will help you. So, first coordinates, easy enough, 0, 0. I like 0, 0. It's easy to find. It's always in the same place, right? 1 and 1/2. 1. My point is x is 1, and I go up to half on the y-axis. So I go up to 1 and 1/2 on the x-axis. Simple enough. 2, 1. That's also decently simple. Pretty easy to find. And 3, 1 and 1/2. So here's 3 on x, and I go up to the point 1 and 1/2. Next thing I do, I draw my line. If you get yourself in a routine with this, it gets very difficult to make a mistake. So, I've drawn my line, and I'm looking at my line. Looks pretty good. Now, what kind of proportion is this? This is, additionally, a direct proportion. Passes through the origin. That's our first clue. Next thing, it increases at a constant rate. And the last thing, x increases as y increases. Whatever's going on, even if x and y are getting smaller, as long as they're moving in the same direction, then I have a direct proportion. This is your third graph from April 14th notes. And this right here, I've already filled out the chart for you, and I just want you to plot the points. So always, first thing, go ahead, number your lines. Make your number on top of your lines. Some of you are numbering between your lines and your graphs are not coming out exactly the way they should. Make your numbers between your graph lines. So I have my favorite point, 0, 0, and then 1, negative 1/2. You have to pay attention to this one because, first of all, we're going into the negatives on the y-axis. Have to pay attention to that, but you also have to pay attention to the fact, and some of you are doing this, where you just make your numbers on the upper side of this line, that's fine. Just keep it where you can remember it. But I generally will graph it underneath and just go over the numbers. You do what works best for you. 2, negative 1/2. 3, negative 1 1/2. And then I draw my line again. Pretty simple. Okay, so this is a negative slope. Remember, negative, think sad. The line is going down. Also, what kind of proportion is this? It passes through the origin, but because it's passing through the origin does not guarantee that it's a direct proportion. I have to look at what's going on. I notice that as my x is getting larger, you see x is saying 0, 1, 2, 3, my y is actually getting smaller. My y is going further into the negatives. It starts at 0, then gets smaller to negative 1/2, then negative 1, then negative 1.5. So this is actually an inverse proportion, as we're being told. So x is getting bigger, y is getting smaller. So this is an inverse proportion. If you look at the graph above this one, you'll see that this is actually a line that's going in the opposite, or going down instead of going up. The other line went like this. Our new line is going this way. And all it took to make it do that was to have our negatives. Our negative number did that. All right, so here we have our standard form. Y equals mx plus b. So negative 3 is my m. Here's our m. And plus 4 is b. So negative 3 is saying that my slope m is negative 3, which means my slope is going to be negative, which means it's going to go down. My b says that my line is going to cross over the y-axis at 4, positive 4. So I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction, which is something you have to be able to do in your math standards, that my line is going to cross over at 0, 4, cross over the y-axis. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and plug in my favorite numbers for using slope-intercept form, 0 and 1. And because I'm just multiplying a whole number by a whole number, I'm going to go ahead and use 2 for the next one. So let's plug this in. Negative 3 times 0, remember we're plugging in our numbers for x, plus 4 just gives me a 0 plus 4, which is 0, 4. First set of coordinates, already done. Next one, negative 3 times 1 plus 4 is negative 3 plus 4, which is 1, 1. Our next set of coordinates. Next one, negative 3 times 2 is 6. Negative 6 plus 4 gives me negative 2. So our next set of coordinates is 2, negative 2. Okay, I could go on and on forever with this, but I don't need to. So I'm going to go ahead and graph my coordinates. Remember to number your graph. Make it easy. Take away any possible error. So next thing, I need to plot my points. I've already got my 0, 4, my 1, 1. Now I just need 2, negative 2. And now all I have left is to draw my line. So here is my line. Don't be hating on my beautiful line now. There. Okay, negative slope. And here is my rise over run, like we were talking about in class on the 15th. So if I were to look at this as rise over run, 1, 2, 3 points, and over 1, I get my rise over run. I'm going down 3, and over 1, That's my change in y over change in x. Rise over run. That's my m. That's a good way to check your answers and make sure you're right. And I can tell from this that I've got the right answer. Now, I have been presented with a problem where slope-intercept form is not in the correct form, as you can see. This -6 is on the wrong side of my equation. I have 3/4 x equals y minus 6. Okay, I have to get the 6 on the other side of the equation before I can solve this. So that means I have to get y by itself. So, you know algebra, I have to do the reverse operation in order to move this integer to the other side of the equal sign. So I say -6 plus 6 over here, and 3/4 x plus 6 over here. And my new equation is now 3/4 x. So my new equation is 3/4 x plus 6 equals y. Now, I'm ready to go. So if I'm making my predictions again, I can look at that 6 in B, and I can say, I think that's where my line is going to cross the y-axis. So I'm going to go ahead and plot my point and see if I'm right. Doesn't cost me anything. Gets me used to finding that B if I'm looking at a graph. It also tells me how far my numbers need to go too, possibly. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my table. If you're not given a table when you're taking a test, make yourself a table. So here's x, here's y. I'm going to put in my favorite numbers, 0, 1, 2, might as well. So 3/4 x times 0, or 3/4 times 0 gives me 0, plus 6 will give me 6. Now 3/4 times 1 gives me 3/4, plus 6 gives me 6 3/4. I'm going to go ahead and write that as a decimal. I am not going to mess around with fractions. Fractions are okay, but it depends on how you do with fractions. If you get confused by seeing a bunch of fractions, just fix that and make it into a decimal. Next one, 3/4. So 3/4 times 2 plus 6, that's really 0.75, times 2, which is 1.5, plus 6 gives me 7.5. So that's my next set of coordinates, 7.5. So I have 0, 6, 1, 6.75, and 2, 7.5. So 0, 6, okay. That is where it crossed the y-axis. 1 is 6.75. Okay, so what kind of slope is this one? This one appears to be a positive slope going up. Okay, is it a direct or inverse proportion? We would just say this one is proportional. We would not say that this is a direct or inverse. This is just proportional. Plain and simple, proportional. Because it does not pass through the origin. Again, this is the type of graph that would be from your health club membership, where you paid a fee up front and then you paid an additional fee every time you came in. So it would only be a proportional relationship because I have my x and my y changing at a constant rate. This is our very last one for April 14th. This is 3.3x equals y. So go ahead, draw that table. Notice I do not have a b. So, I wonder, what does that mean? X, y, plug in your favorite numbers, 0, 1, 2, you can go as high as you want. I only need 3 coordinates. I only need 2, but I'm going to give you 3. So 3.3 times 0 just gives me plain old 0. Wonderful. Any number times 0 is always going to be 0. 3.3 times 1 gives me 3.3. Also a very lovely number. 2 times 3.3 Pretty simple, but I'll go ahead and show you. 6.6. So 2, 6.6. 1, 3.300. All right. So go ahead and graph. Here's 0, 0, 1, 3.3, and 2, 6.6. It'll be just above the halfway mark. And then draw your line. Okay, so what kind of proportion is this one? This one is a lovely direct proportion. And what kind of slope is this? This is a positive slope. It's a direct proportion because x is increasing as y increases at a constant rate and passes through the origin.